Welcome to another episode of Erik Wait Whiskey Studies, and in this video, going to do a review of the Talisker Storm Single Malt Scotch Whisky. So this video is part of a series that I'm doing and studying for the Council of Whiskey Masters. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth than I normally do in videos. We're going to look at the history of Talisker Distillery, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about this whiskey. Talisker Distillery is located in Carbos, Scotland, on the Minginish Peninsula on the Isle of Skye. In 1830, Talisker Distillery was founded by Hugh and Kenneth MacAskill. Hugh MacAskill leased the site from the MacLeods, having raised £3,000 and built the distillery. He chose to name it after his estate, Talisker, 5 miles west, rather than the village in which it was located. In 1831, Talisker Distillery was opened after they acquired the lease of Talisker House from Clan MacLeod. In 1854, Kenneth MacAskill died. In 1857, North of Scotland Bank sold the distillery to Donald MacLennan for £500. In 1863, Donald MacLennan experienced difficulties in making the distillery viable and put it up for sale. In 1865, Donald MacLennan was still working at the distillery, and he nominated John Anderson as an agent in Glasgow. In 1867, Anderson and Company took over Talisker Distillery. In 1879, John Anderson was imprisoned after selling non-existing casks. In 1880, Talisker was acquired by Alexander Gregor Allen and Roderick Kemp. In 1892, Roderick Kemp sold his share of Talisker Distillery and purchased the Macallan Distillery. In 1894, the Talisker Distillery Limited was founded. In 1897, Alexander Gregor Allen died and Thomas Mackenzie, his partner, took over the distillery. In 1898, Talisker Distillery merged with Dalyoun Glenlivet Distillers and Imperial Distillers to form Dalyoun Talisker Distillers Company. In 1916, Thomas Mackenzie died and the distillery was taken over by a consortium consisting of John Walker, John Dewar, W.P. Lowry, and Distillers Company Limited, also known as DCL. By 1925, Talisker Distillery was owned by Distillers Company Limited, and later it became a part of Diageo. In 1928, Talisker Distillery ceased triple distillation. In 1960, on November 22nd, Talisker Distillery caught fire and was heavily damaged. In 1972, Talisker Distillery ceased malting its own barley. In 1988, the Talisker 10-year-old became one of the classic malts and a visitor center was opened. In 1988, a new stainless steel copper mash tun and 5 new worm tubs were installed. Talisker Distillers Edition with Amoroso Sherry Cask finish was also released. In 2004, the Talisker 18-year-old and 25-year-old were released. In 2005, the Talisker 175th Anniversary Edition was released, and the 3rd edition of the Talisker 25-year-old cask strength was released. In 2006, the Talisker 30-year-old and 4th edition of the Talisker 25-year-old cask strength was released. In 2007, the 2nd edition of the Talisker 30-year-old and 5th edition of the Talisker 25-year-old cask strength was released. In 2008, Talisker 57 North, the 6th edition of the Talisker 25-year-old cask strength, and the 3rd edition of the Talisker 30-year-old was released. In 2010, the 1994 Talisker Manager's Choice Single Cask and new edition of Talisker 30-year-old was released. In 2011, there were 3 Talisker Limited releases, the 25-year-old, the 30-year-old, and the 34-year-old. In 2012, the limited Talisker 35-year-old was released. In 2013, Talisker Storm, Dark Storm, Port Rugy, and the 27-year-old was released. In 2014, a bottling for the Friends of the Classic Malts was released. In 2015, Talisker Sky and Naste Point were released. In 2018, the Talisker 40-year-old, the first in the new Bodega series, and an 8-year-old special release were launched. In 2019, the Talisker 41-year-old Bodega series and House Greyjoy and the Game of Thrones series was released. The Talisker Storm Single Malt Scotch Whisky. It was first released in early 2013. It's made with barley dried with peat. It's aged in refill and toasted American oak casks. It's a non-age statement. It's bottled at 45.8% alcohol by volume. Sells for anywhere between $38 and $67 with an average price of $57. So as you saw there in the notes, it's a non-age statement. One of the most important things you can do in studying whiskey, particularly if you can visit a distillery, is taste some White Dog. If you're going to a bourbon distillery, taste some new make if you go to a Scotch or Irish whiskey or some other distillery. Because you need to calibrate your palate, your nose, your brain, so that you can perceive how old a whiskey is, even if it doesn't have it labeled on a bottle. So I'm not a die-hard, hey, I need an age statement person. However, when I get a non-age statement whiskey and I can tell that this is a mere youth, that it hasn't spent enough time in a cask, I get a little bit perturbed. Now, one of the things you're going to get on a new make is a sort of powdered sugar, aspartame, saccharine character to it. I don't particularly like that character in my whiskey. It's not super offensive, but I don't like it, and I particularly don't like it if it lingers in the follow-through or the aftertaste. Now, some people like, really young peated whiskeys, because young peated whiskeys really tend to show off a lot of brute peat character, a lot of smoke. Now, Talisker peats their whiskeys, as you saw there in the video. It tends to come across a little bit more as a pepper, so it comes across a little more as spice. And this whiskey, unfortunately, that pepper character and that smoke character doesn't cover up the youth in this bottle. Because when I first opened it up, I definitely got that powdered sugar saccharine note. Now, as I've gotten it down, below the label, it's got a little bit more aeration. It has become a little bit more integrated into the whiskey, so it's not as noticeable. Also, if you try with a little bit of water, also it tends to help that sort of saccharine, powdered sugar character, aspartame, you know what I'm talking about, get more into the whiskey so it's not as noticeable and doesn't hang around on the finish. But if you're just tasting it neat, yeah, it's there. Now, the other thing about it is when you go through, it has some young, fresh fruit character, some apple, some pear, maybe a little bit of tropical character, maybe a little bit of melon. That smoky, ashy, smoky character is there. And then on the palate, about 3/4 of the way back, get a real sharp kick of freshly ground black pepper. And then the smoke character, a little bit of ash, maybe just a little bit of chocolate shows up on the back end. For me, this whiskey is too young. Even now, even though it's been open for a while, even though it got to blow the shoulder, even if I've added some water, there's enough of that aftertaste of that, fake sugar, aspartame, you know what I'm talking about, saccharine note that sticks around, that I'm just like, ugh. For the price point, there are a lot of other whiskeys I would rather have. I can get an Ardbeg 10-year-old with an age statement that'll absolutely blow this away, that I would like a lot more. A 10-year-old that doesn't have the aftertaste, that has nice development to it. Now, I watched a number of different videos of fellow reviewers who reviewed the Dark Storm, that's a whole nother one, who reviewed the Talisker Storm, and they seemed to like it. However, I noticed that it seems that they had a different bottle. This, if you search around, look at Google Images, you're going to notice there are some bottles that are all blue. I'll put a picture up here or over here. That is the older label. Now, stylistically, I like this label. It has sort of like the outline of a map of the coastline of the Isle of Skye. It's got a little map indicating where Talisker is on the map, and the box, you know, it has little rock outlets off the coast of the ocean, so you get a sense of the ocean. So I like the design of it. However, I suspect, and I could be wrong, but I suspect that the older bottles of Talisker Storm might have had more age in them, and so they didn't have those characteristics. Because of those that I watched of the reviewers, I respect their palate. They're people I've known for a little while here in the whiskey tuber world, and I take what they say as being the truth and their perception of the whiskey. I don't doubt that, so, which makes me think potentially the ones with just solid blue that just show the ocean, don't have the coastline, don't have the map on it, those ones might be a little older and consequently don't have these super youthy notes. Now, what am I going to give it in terms of a score? Fresh pineapple, melon, apple, pear up front, pepper, little bit of chocolatey character, and a whiff of smoke on the back end. The development is pretty good, but it's that second effect. As I'm talking right now, and I kind of smack my lips,
it's still there, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That fake sugar is there. If you're not a fan of Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi, or these really, or maybe the old diet sodas before they were using whatever the hell it is they put in diet sodas these days, you know, they had saccharin in there and they really had that aftertaste. It's still there. So it's got a lot going for it. There are a lot of things I like about it. It's that one particular character I don't like, and that's gonna kill it for me at this price point. So I'm gonna give it a 82 points, and I'm gonna say because of other whiskeys on the market, I'm gonna give it a pass, because there are better whiskeys for $10, $20 less that would absolutely blow this away. All right, that's it for this review. If you subscribe to the channel, I want to thank you very much. If you've not yet subscribed, if you like watching my videos, I would ask that you give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and until next time, cheers. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.